From Captain America and Spider-Man to the X-Men and the Hulk.
Anyone else?
Even if you've never read the comics, you'll likely recognize these iconic superheroes and their world-famous creator.
I think it would be quite accurate to say that Marvel revolutionized the superhero comic.
With thousands of characters and interweaving storylines, the Marvel Universe is one of the most astonishing tales in modern fiction. But it all began to unravel for the company at the turn of the millennium.
It was losing sight of what you were trying to sell. Sell stories. It was kind of like a victim of its own success.
Every great story has a point where the hero is on his knees, seemingly beyond salvation. Marvel's darkest hour came when it declared bankruptcy, followed by an all-out war between investors that raged for years.
There's a lot of screaming on telephones and threats to destroy one another.
Everybody was just scared to death.
This is the inside story of how one of the world's most beloved pop culture icons re-emerged from the ruins of its comic book empire and fought its way back to the top. New York, home to Marvel's headquarters and to many of its superheroes. From epic battles at Grand Central Station to spectacular rescues on the Staten Island ferry. Part of the magic of Marvel for long-time fans like Sean Howe is that its characters are set in the real world.
People that I knew from New York City, they had the feeling that they might catch a glimpse of superhero battle, when they're on the way to the post office or something.
For almost 80 years, Marvel has captivated comic fans across the globe, producing best-selling comic books, cartoons, video games, and record-breaking box office hits. Marvel has conquered the entertainment world. But rewind 3 decades earlier, and Marvel wasn't just battling comic supervillains. It was combating bankruptcy, staff defections, and tied up in a legal battle that threatened to destroy the company.
Now I know what you're thinking. How did this happen? Well, it's a long story.
To find out, we go back to the beginnings of the Marvel Universe. The superheroes we know today were born in New York in the late 1930s. In the midst of the Great Depression, Marvel's rival, DC Comics, created a character that became an instant hit.
Superman was an inspiration for a lot of kids in the Depression. He was a crusader for the masses.
Superman was soon followed by another caped crusader. The two propelled DC Comics' popularity well ahead of Marvel, then just a small pulp fiction publisher known as Timely.
From earlier years, Marvel was always the kind of second place company. Superman and Batman at DC Comics were kind of the industry standard, and Marvel was sort of a scrappy other player.
To cash in on the trend, Timely hired a team to produce its own line of superheroes. Cartoonists Joe Simon and Jack Kirby would go on to create some of Marvel's most famous characters. And as America entered the Second World War, Timely's patriotic superhero, who battled real-life enemies in World War II, struck a chord with soldiers and their families back home.
I think that it was a way to see victory, to have an idea of what that would feel like.
The 1930s and 40s were the golden age of comics in the United States. And as American soldiers brought their comics overseas, they also gained popularity in Korea and Japan and helped influence the development of local manga comics. But in the 1950s, there was a growing movement against violence and gore in comic books.
Comic books allowed each other and it's wrong.
It resulted in regulation that severely limited the kind of content publishers could print.
The Comics Code ensured that you wouldn't have vampire drugs in a comic. Everything was now just completely defanged and no fun, so comic sales plummeted.
By the early 1960s, Marvel was struggling just to stay in business. The company's editor-in-chief, Stan Lee, was ready to quit. But then Marvel's old rival, DC Comics, threw together its most popular characters into a single supergroup.
Their mission, to fight injustice and to serve all mankind.
The Justice League became a surprise hit and inspired Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby to create their own team of superheroes.
The greatest team of superheroes the world has ever known. Fantastic Four.
The first issue broke convention with all superhero archetypes of the day. Unlike the stoic and near-flawless Superman and Batman, Lee and Kirby's heroes came not just with superpowers, but with problems that readers could relate to.
It was the beginning of characters having a three-dimensionality that really set Marvel apart.
Danny Fingeroth edited some of Marvel's most famous superheroes for close to 2 decades.
Marvel Comics gave you a depth of characterization where people could work together but not like each other, or like each other but be angry at each other, or quit the team. As far as comic books, that was fairly unprecedented.
A year later, Marvel strayed even further from comic conventions. For the first time, a teenager became a superhero. Such was Marvel's impact, there's now an exhibit dedicated to its famous character in New York.
Spider-Man is my favorite character now. He's very complex, and yet he's very simple. He's the most like a regular person. Peter Parker was shy and introverted, didn't have a lot of friends. Also has to work 2 or 3 extra jobs, and then has a sick relative, and yet wants to excel, and he wants to try to have a social life. I mean, it's really a very modern story, right? It's about a kid who has more responsibilities than any kid should have, especially the responsibility of being Spider-Man.
Spider-Man became the most popular comic book character since Superman, but Marvel's biggest innovation was just round the corner. As more superheroes emerged, they began to interact and cross over with each other's stories. This collective became known as the Marvel Universe.
The narrative of the Marvel Universe is just a staggering achievement that I think is really the most complicated narrative that probably exists in history.
It wasn't just a new universe that Stan Lee and his collaborators forged. In periodic updates, Stan Lee gave readers a glimpse into the inner workings of the Marvel office, featuring writers, artists, and even secretaries.
So you had 2 levels of connection in every comic. You had not just the stories themselves, but you had updates of what was going on in the office, and you had a sense that you knew the people behind the stories. They were like almost surrogate family members.
The team at Marvel became as popular with fans as the superheroes they created.
I think Stan Lee is one of those figures without whom there might not be a comic book industry, both creatively and on a business and promotional level. He reinvented what the superhero was and could be.
By the 1970s, Marvel was the #1 comic book company in the world, releasing 40 different titles every month and selling 50 million comics a year in more than 100 countries. Its superheroes even became stars on animated shows. The company, traditionally in second place to its rival, DC Comics, was now #1. But it somehow retained its status as an underdog.
So you had DC Comics with Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Everybody knows those characters. But with Marvel, we were like the struggling company. We had Spider-Man and the Hulk and these guys who had problems. And so even though we were the best-selling comics, we were still the underdog.
Lou Bank joined Marvel in the mid-1980s.
As the underdog, the guys who were fighting the good fight. And it felt like we were all fighting the good fight.
But as the company became increasingly successful, that changed.
People were laughing, and then people were excited, and then people were greedy.
The owners of Marvel became progressively less knowledgeable and less interested in the comic books.
They weren't in it for the long haul. They wanted to make as much money as they could make right now, right here, and damn the consequences.
And things were about to get even worse when Marvel was sold to a financier called Ron Perlman. By the 1980s, the comic industry was booming worldwide, with people hungry for heroes. Once considered cheap and disposable, comics had become prized items, and speculators were snapping up issues in bulk to resell them to collectors for enormous profits. The frenzy also reached Asia's shores, including the Philippines, India, and Singapore. 83-year-old Bill Teo opened his comic book store in Singapore 30 years ago.
There's something special when you open the comics, the colors, there's a strange kind of feeling you get. At one time there was only one specialty store like this in Singapore, and the lady who owned it was charging ridiculous prices. One day at cover price, and the next day it can be 3-4 times. My son and I both were comic readers, and after a year or two, we said this is getting to be ridiculous, and we decided to open a store.
When the comic boom hit, Bill's comics sold out fast.
When the speculative market was ripe, comics were selling like hotcakes, you know what I mean? The queue was around the block. Fantastic.
Jerry Hines also witnessed the value of comics in Singapore surge.
There were certain cases where a comic might cost, say, $5 Singapore, but within the space of 2 months, it can worth as much as $50, and then some hundreds of dollars.
In the US, vintage comics that cost $400 in the 1970s shot up to $5,000 US a decade later. By the early 90s, some first-issue comics were worth $40,000 US and up. To cash in, the number of specialty comic book stores surged globally from a few hundred to over 10,000. As rare and new comic books were flying off the shelves, Marvel attracted the interest of millionaire businessman Ron Perlman, who bought the company for over $80 million in 1989. Perlman would significantly change the way Marvel ran its business.
Perlman was kind of a step above a conglomerate owner. He was a corporate raider. He was somebody who had no emotional connection to the comics. So, this was Marvel's first real existence as kind of a piece in someone's game.
I can remember Ron coming through the office during that first week, and he may not have been smoking a cigar, but he was at least chewing a cigar. He was just this short little man who looked like he owned the world, being toured through the offices by a young woman dressed as Spider-Woman in spandex. And to me, that's who Ron Perlman will always be. This guy who owns the world that can make young women dress up in spandex.
Eubank joined Marvel 2 years before Perlman bought over the company.
When I started at Marvel, I was surrounded by the people whose comics I had grown up reading. It was really amazing. It was fun, it was exciting. Everybody was thrilled to be there. When the announcement came that the company was being sold, everybody was nervous. And as we saw Perlman walking through the office, we became more nervous.
To drive growth, Perlman first set out to raise the price of comic books by appealing to collectors.
They started marketing their comics as products, as collector's items, as things that were other than the inherent value of something you read.
We had a practice of doing special covers, enhanced covers, glow-in-the-dark covers, foil covers, hologram covers, and adding a glow-in-the-dark cover caused us to take that same 32-page comic book that we sold for $1.50 and instead make it $2.95. And the short-term consequences of that were that we would sell 4 times as many copies of that comic. Double the price, sell 4 times the comic. Looks great on the bottom line.
Initially, Perlman's strategy worked dramatically. Over the next couple of years, Marvel's revenues grew by 50% and its profits multiplied 6-fold. In 1991, the company went public, and its market value ballooned to $3 billion US.
We all thought that was hilarious, because we're just a bunch of guys running around the office shooting each other with plastic guns at night. But the mood at Marvel changed significantly after the initial public offering.
With shareholders now expecting bigger returns, the pressure at Marvel intensified.
When Marvel goes public, that's when profits have to be up every quarter. Marvel started just increasing production at a crazy rate.
In 1985, Marvel had been publishing 40 titles a month. By 1993, they'd more than doubled that number. But printing so many comics and specialty covers started to dilute the Marvel brand.
These are all different gimmicks. Some of them very nice gimmicks. But gimmicks are gimmicks. Eventually they run a bit thin.
But for Ron Perlman, you couldn't get enough of a good thing.
I can't remember a month that we weren't the #1 publisher. That didn't satisfy the Perlman administration. When we hit 68% market share, that didn't satisfy the Perlman administration. So more enhanced covers and more titles.
Perlman's marketing team also began to dictate the content of the comics. Artists and writers were told to engineer more crossover stories that featured its best-selling superheroes to display at comic book stores like this one in New York.
We knew that there were people that were ravenous, Wolverine and Punisher, and always Spider-Man collectors. And all you gotta do is put those characters into a low-selling comic, and suddenly you sell more copies, because people wanted to maintain their complete Spider-Man collection, the complete Wolverine collection. But at some point, the guy who collects every appearance of Wolverine can no longer afford to collect every appearance of Wolverine. At some point, you chase the guy away by trying to take too much of his money.
The plots also figured into one another, so readers had to buy all related issues if they wanted to make sense of them. As production increased, the quality and content of the comics began to suffer. And this started to alienate the company's core audience. But if Marvel was losing readers, why was it still seeing a record number of sales every month? The problem was the distribution system. Unlike traditional newsstands, specialty comic book shops can't return unsold copies for a refund. If the issues don't sell, retailers shoulder the cost. So Marvel couldn't tell how many comics the shops were actually selling to customers.
I love
And this was about
the
to become
concept.
a big problem.
Kasi nag-report ako kanina. Dapat
Bookstore
pala
manager
nila
Jeff
yung
Ayres discovered shops that had bought a huge
Nag-report ako kanina, dapat
oversupply of
nila
comic
yung
books for speculators.
I had seen in other stores that I worked at, hung out in basement long boxes of millions of books. There's spawn number 1, box 2, box 3, box 4. And it's because stores have bought so much of this manufactured tripe and told that everybody's gonna want 50 of those. And it just wasn't the case. And then, I mean, a lot of stores start hurting.
When news got to Lou back, he went to the comic book stores to find out what was going on.
When you had those conversations with comic book store owners about what they were selling and what they were sitting on, that's when they started getting very dark, and the conversation was very bleak. And it gave me the sense that something was going on here that we needed to recognize.
Lou sent field representatives out to survey comic stores across the country. Their findings were shocking. Every time Marvel sold its special editions, subsequent issues saw a 20% decline in sales. Readers were getting tired of expensive and gimmicky comics that were mainly marketed to collectors and speculators. Lou sent an urgent memo to Marvel's senior management.
And I'm sure I CC'd 6 million other people, showing that we were literally chasing away our long-term readers, our long-term customers, by doing these enhanced covers. And the reaction to that memo was silence.
Marvel continued to publish enhanced covers and also began to include trading cards to encourage more collectors, alienating even more of their readers. Meanwhile, comic book shops, unable to cope with unsold stock, started to close down.
So it just seemed absolutely absurd to me. Now I understand what they were doing. They weren't in it for the long haul. They wanted to make as much money as they could make right now, right here, and damn the consequences. Damn the people who suffered the results of their decision. We got what we needed out of them. We don't need them anymore. I didn't want to be a part of that strip mining. I didn't want to be a part of what I saw as the coming downfall of Marvel.
The insatiable drive for profit at Marvel was also beginning to wear thin with its creative team. By this time, founding editor-in-chief Stan Lee had moved to California to pursue Hollywood deals for the company. And the new editors left in charge weren't being allowed to do their jobs.
The editor's job was to set direction for the comic, and suddenly there was this marketing division that was setting direction, and the editors were not happy. They feel like they should have more say in what the stories are. At some point, that created a conflict.
And certainly demoralized the people working in editorial, and that's a double-edged sword of being fan. You have this nostalgic feeling for the characters, you also know you're in business, and there's that constant tug of war.
You had all these editors slamming their heads up against the wall to make the comics that they were responsible for spike in sales.
Got really sad, and there was more infighting, and people were just unhappy. They weren't having fun.
And then in 1992, the inevitable happened. In a mass exodus, Marvel's top talent left to join rivals and to form their own publishing houses.
By alienating writers and artists who had developed stories, who had popularized the characters, Marvel ended up setting themselves up for failure.
As comic book readers followed their favorite artists to the new labels, Marvel's market share dropped from 45 to 30%. Meanwhile, their special and collectible comics had oversaturated the market.
If you print tens of thousands of a particular kind of comic, immediately it can't be worth as much. So it was kind of like a victim of its own success.
In 1993, when speculators and collectors realized that the value of comics had been inflated, the comic industry imploded. publisher sales plummeted by 70%. And 9 out of 10 comic book stores in America closed their doors. In the Philippines, Malaysia, and Singapore, it was no different.
Before the crash came, there were about 20 plus stores. Now there are only 3 or 4 at the most left.
Although Will's shop survived, he had hundreds of boxes of unsold issues.
$50,000 worth of comics I incinerated for a lot. I had to hire a truck to carry those to the incinerator.
Back in the US, the comics division that had once made up 90% of Marvel's sales was now a third of its business. In a desperate attempt to spur growth, Perlman had gone on an acquisition spree. From trading card manufacturers to sticker companies and a toy retailer, Perlman drove Marvel's debt up to $600 million US, all the while moving it further and further away from its core, comic books. By 1995, the company was in crisis. It reported a $48 million loss, the first time since Perlman had bought the company that they hadn't turned a profit. Its stock value collapsed. Shares, once worth $35 in 1993, had sunk to just $2. As a result, Marvel announced company-wide cuts. 40% of its workforce was let go. After almost 2 decades of the company, editor Danny Fingeroth made the difficult decision to leave.
I was heartbroken to leave Marvel. Things had changed there in such a way that it was very unpleasant for me on a day-to-day basis. But, I'd worked there for 18 years. It was where I'd grown up. I'd say outside of the end of a romantic relationship or the death of a loved one, leaving Marvel was the most traumatic thing that ever happened.
By 1996, Marvel reported a staggering loss of over $460 million US. The company desperately needed cash to keep running and to pay back its debts. But in a disagreement with shareholders over the company's future, Perlman declared bankruptcy. As majority owner, it gave him the power to reorganize Marvel without their consent. But in doing so, Perlman dragged the company's reputation through the mud in a series of very public court battles. Surrounded by the smouldering ruin of its comic book empire, Marvel was in its darkest hour, and the future looked bleak.
There's a lot of screaming on telephones and threats to destroy one another. There was something that was so absurd and grotesque about these cold-hearted men suing each other to have custody of something that emotionally a lot of comic readers thought belonged to them.
In 1998, after a 2-year battle, it was finally over. Ron Perlman, sued for diverting over $500 million US from Marvel to his other businesses, was ousted from the company. But Marvel was still broke, surviving on a $200 million loan that had to be repaid soon.
I have a 5
It now needed a superhero of its own to save the day. In 1999, the company brought in Peter Cuneo. Known as the turnaround king,
like the
he
topic
successfully
and,
guided 6 businesses
thank you
through
for
tough
watching
times,
my live.
including cosmetics company Clairol and
So yun mga kahombre ko, tulad ng sabi ko sa video ko, na kapag laos na si Diwata, ako na yung
Panoodin natin guys yung ano.
na pupunta dito.
Si
yung
vlog ni
kung kamukha ko talaga yung aking sinasabi niya. Alam,
panoodin natin yung vlog niya ni Makagago din. Ang content niya si Diwata, no? So, tuwal naman dyan kayo and I'm here. And, yun lang. try natin panoorin yung vlog ni Makagago kay Diwata.
Diba, kilala mo naman ako, hindi naman ako natatakot sa mga ganyan. Ito daw po ang the biggest American bully. Kaya naman pinangalanan ko siya, MJ. Ay, MJ, shout out naman sa mga viewers natin. Ayan, o. Gusto ko lang makita kung totoo talaga na kaya niya sabihin sa mukha ko yan. Dahil hindi naman akong galit. Let's go. So what's up sa mga kahobre ko dyan? Makagago ko sa kanya naman niya pala to. At syempre, mga kahobre ko, today is the day kung saan finally akin ang matutunghayan ang the biggest street vendor sa buong Pilipinas. The biggest street vendor na nagka-chance pero lumaki ang ulo. The biggest street vendor na sumikat numero 1 sa buong Pilipinas. The legend himself, the king of the vendors. And this is the rise and fall of Diwata. At kasama na siya sa ating Wall of Fame. Follow niyo rin ako sa Facebook page ko. Si Deo Harito Balbuena o mas kilalang Diwata ay isang Filipino internet personality, entrepreneur at advocate ng LGBT community. Ipinanganak siya noong August 31, 1982 sa Northern Samar at lumuwas lamang ito sa Metro Manila upang makalabas sa hirap at magtrabaho. Grabe, crazy kong kanyang buhay, mga kahobre ko.
Kasi si Diwata ay talagang tubo at pinanganak sa Samar.
Yes po.
Pumunta ka dito sa Maynila.
Ang siguro pag hindi ako 17, 18 or 16, di ba makatanda ako?
Oo.
Basta ganun lang, yung tatlo na yun.
Pumunta ka na Maynila dahil
Para magtrabaho.
Kilala rin ito sa negosyo niyang Diwata Pares Overlook at tumakbo bilang isang representative ng isang party list. Meron itong 1.3 million followers sa Facebook at 81,000 subscribers sa YouTube. Nakuha nito ang pangalan ng Diwata sa pamamagitan ng pagsali sa mga beauty pageant at sa pagtanghati nito sa programa ni Kuya Will.
Nag-show din ako dati sa kay Kuya Will, nung na-discover niya, beauty ko yung category, tapos parang durable yung Diwata ko.
tas wala na, yun na yun.
Yun na yun, tapos hindi ako kakagaw sa mute lang.
And besides, sa show namin sa TV5, yung Real Time Date Time, naging gesture namin si Diwata. Yung pagka-commercial, sila yung nagpapatawa. And then, si Kuya mismo ang nagbigay ng name niya as Diwata, not just because of Kuya Billy.
At tandaan mga kahombre ko, na si Diwata ko actually deserves more than what he earned from his social media platforms. And isa po yan sa nakakalungkot sa kanyang karera. Hoy, mga kahombre ko, gusto niyo bang malaman kung saan ito nakuha ito? Napakasimple lang. Ang gagawin niyo lang ay mag-scroll down kayo at i-click nyo ang link sa pinned comment. Then mag-register kayo, email, password, at sa promo code which is ang ilalagay nyo ay MK2025 para naman may extra ang unang pinag-deposit mo. Ngayon, after nyo makapag-register, mag-top up na kayo sa inyong balance, then pwede ka na magsimulang mag-trade. Which is napakadali lang since ang pipiliin nyo ay either buy or sell. So in this case, maglalagay ako ng 1,500 pesos and at this rate ay magsesell ako. Wait lang natin matapos ito at bang! Profit tayo! Ngayon, sa nakikita mo ay sobrang hirap ito dahil first time mo lang. Huwag ka pag-alala dahil pwede mo naman itong pag-practicean. Which is ang gagawin nyo lang ay pumunta kayo dito sa trading option, then click Quick Trading Demo Account. Sa demo account na to, mga kahombre ko, ay pwede kayong mag-practice with over 130 plus assets offered by Pocket Broker. Plus, hindi nyo pa ginagastos ang inyong sariling pera para masubukan nyo. If kumita ka na at gusto mo itong makuha, pwede mo na din itong i-withdraw. Which is ang gagawin nyo lang, ay pumunta naman kayo dito sa finance option, then click withdrawal. Ayan. Pwede nyo nang i-withdraw agad-agad mga kahombre ko through bank transfers,
e-wallet o cryptocurrencies with 0% commission. Mga kahombre ko, ready ka na bang magsimula? I-click mo lang yung link na nakapin comment and then afterwards, ilagay mo yung promo code ko na MK2025 and then yes, welcome to the family. Kasi mas nagamit siya ng ibang mga tao, ibang mga sikat na personalidad kaysa sa kanyang sarili. Nagsimulang lumabas si Diwata sa media ukol sa isang balitang kumakalat na sinaksak daw ito sa mukha ng kanyang kaibigan.
Nagmula sa kalangitan, lumagapak sa kalupaan, narito na sa inyong harapan ang nag-isang diwata na mukhang kabataan.
Ayon sa kwento ni Diwata, nagawang saksakin siya nito sapagkat pinapalayas niya ito sa kanilang tinutuluyang barong-barong sa ilalim ng tulay dahil nahuli niya itong gumagamit ng ipinagbabawal na gamot. Imagine niyo mga kahombre kung saan po galing si Diwata sa napakapangit na buhay, napakahirap na buhay. And actually, he came from hell and he went up to the heavens. Kumbaga sa life, ha? Kasi grabe mga kahombre ko, this is not possible. Sa mga tulad niya na nasa ilalim ng tulay, that's very, very tough. Kung iisipin niyo. Kasi sobrang hirap po na maalis ka sa ganung klase ng circle mo, pero wala. Diwata made it possible, mga kahombre ko. Sa pangyayari ito, nakaramdam ng pagkapuot ang kaibigan nito at sinaksak na lang daw siya ng box cutter sa mukha.
Papalisin niya kami doon sa ilalim ng tulay. Eh, wala nang may-ari ng tulay. Salamat pa siya, yan ang nangyari sa amin.
Pero tandaan, mga kahombre ko, yan po ay nakaraan na. Sa ngayon, masaya na sila at okay na sila nung kaibigan niya na yon na sumaksak sa kanya. And kung di ako nagkakamali, binigyan din ulit ng chance yun ni Diwata at pinagtrabaho niya yon sa kanyang branch sa Pasay.
Oo, kasi yung sumaksak daw sa'yo, nagtatrabaho.
Yes. Nakamot mo lang kami dati. Nasa akin ngayon.
So okay na po sila. Okay, matapos halos magkakulungan, magkasaksakan. Because even before all of this thing, si Diwata po lumabas na sa TV. Kaso sa news nga lang. Grabe, hindi talaga ng story ni Diwata. Ikalawang appearance naman ni Diwata ay 6 years ago. At ito ang pagsali niya sa isang Miss Q&A na program ng Showtime. Sa mga panahon na ito, nabanggit ni Diwata na isa siyang naghihirap na construction worker at meron siyang boyfriend na kinekwento niya in a way na parang ginagamit lamang siya.
Saan mo ba yung asawa mo yun?
Wala. Nanot lang siya. Pero ayaw niya pakilala ko siya.
Bakit naman?
Basta sa patay, sabihin ko rin asawa ko, pero huwag ka banggit mo yung pangalan.
O sige, ganito na lang.
So, imagine niyo mga kapatid. Fame or luck or money, kayamanan, is not given. Hinahanap po ito. Nakita niyo naman, from tulay, nakaangat siya papunta sa Showtime. Kung sa taong normal, mahirap lang pumila-pila. Partida na busog ka pa, may tinitirahan ka pa, okay ka, tira. Imagine niyo para sa taong nakatira sa tulay. And yet, he's made it sa Showtime, mga kahombre ko. Grabe, hindi din mag-hassle talaga sa buhay nitong tao na to. Noong panahon ng pandemic, nagawang nahinto ang pagko-construction ni Diwata. Kaya naisipan na lang nito maghanap ng ibang paraan upang kumita. Nakapag-desisyon na lamang si Diwata na ituloy ito sa pamamagitan ng pagtinda ng mga merienda.
Tapos na akong friend na chip cook naman, nawalan ko siya ng trabaho, ay naman tayo nagtitinda na ako, may konting ipon na ako, sabi niya sa akin, kasi marunong siya magluto bakit hindi natin lagyan ng pagkain, tulungan kita magluto, bili ka na ng kawali, ganito kung ano kailangan. Tapos nung ako nag-start, magtinda ng pagkain muna, hindi pa paris.
Hindi alam ni Diwata na yung paglagay niya ng ulam, napagdagdag niya ng pagkain, merienda, o ng pare sa kanyang pwesto. Yun ang makakapagpayaman at makakapag-totally alis sa kanya sa ganong sitwasyon.
Pero kasi di ba nauso yung paris sa kalsada, marami naganap sa akin paris naman dyan. So nagka-interest na ako, tinanong ko siya kung marunong siyang paris, sabi niya marunong daw siya. Tapos ngayon, okay na, naging Diwata paris na siya, doon ako nakilala ngayon.
Dahil doon, tinransform na ni Diwata ang kanyang kainan to Diwata paris. Kung saan pinagkilit na ito ng napakaraming tao. Ang kanyang pares, mga kahombre ko, even before ay dinadayo yan. At nakailang lipat yan dahil ilang beses siyang pinapatalsik sa lugar kung saan niya tinirik ang parisan niya. Alam niyo kung bakit? Kasi dinudumog ng mga tao at nahihirapan na ang mga MMDA or traffic enforcer na ayusin ang sitwasyon at nakakapag-build din ito ng matinding traffic. Ganyan ka-successful si Diwata, mga ka-offer. Real talk lang yan. Yan talaga, hindi natin pwedeng alisin yan, di Diwata. Mas binuong ito ng mga tao nung kanya itong ginawang pares overload. Kung saan sa halagang 100 piso lamang ay meron ka lang anti-rice, anti-sabaw, at may isang libreng soft drink. Siyempre, unang beses yan, mga kahombre ko. This is very original of him. Kaya nga, di ba, kung sino man ang nakaka-invento, siya ang yumayaman. Kasi original. Once na original ang recipe mo, original ang content mo, kung YouTuber ka, original ang business mo, you'll win it. You'll win the game. Kasi at the end of the day, business is a game. It's a game of thinking and lalong-lalo na it's a game of luck. Ayon sa pagdayo ng mga vloggers at iba't ibang mga influencers, karamihan sa kanila noong nagsisimula pa lang ang negosyo ni Diwata ay sinasabing hindi ito kasarapan. Hindi po natin maaalis, mga kahombre ko. Iba't iba ang taste buds ng mga tao. Pero we need to understand na 100 piso para sa isang pares overload na punong-puno ng laman at syempre, ang rice na may soft drink pa sa halagang 100 piso, napakaliit po ito. So kung ano man ang inyong malalasahan at kung ano man ang inyong masasabi sa inihain ni Diwata sa inyo, tama lang yun. Kasi grabe naman, kung pang fine dining din ang lasa nun, iba na po klase ang mga utak ninyo. Mababang puhunan equals mababang negosyo, mababang bentahan, pero lalong-lalo na mababang klase ng mga ingredients. So wala kang pwedeng i-expect. Ang lahat ay nagtataka sapagkat sinasaad nilang hindi ito kasarapan pero napakaraming tao ang mga dumadayo. Pumipila at dinudumog ito. Dalawa lang po ang rason kung bakit ito dinadayo. Una, nasasarapan talaga. Pangalawa, para gatasan si Diwata. Mga kahombre ko, dito po dapat magpasalamat ang napakaraming influencers. Si Diwata, yung tipo ng tao na mas mahalaga pa sa kanya ang kanyang negosyo kaysa sa kanyang fame. Sinasabi niya naman yan.
Nandito lang ako upang magnegosyo. Wala akong pakialam sa kaskatan.
Tama naman, may point siya, no? Hanggang sa nagising siya, one day, lumabas ang unang issue sa paresan ni Diwata kung saan maraming mga vloggers, especially small vloggers, ang sumusumbong na i-vlog si Diwata at gawan siya ng content upang ito ay pagkakitaan. Dahil nga po nung panahon na yon, Diwata was the meta. Tandaan niyo yan. Si Diwata po, literal na pagka sinulat mo sa video mo, Diwata pares overload, automatically, mga kahombre ko, million of views. It gains a lot of traction ng mga panahon na yon. Sobrang crazy. Kasama dito, ang pinaka-gatasero sa balat ng lupa na si Art at Alvin TV, kung saan nagawa na nilang rumenta na matutuloy at malapit sa paresan ni Diwata upang patuloy nila itong magatasan. Unang na-featured ang mga ito sa pamamagitan ng pagdayo ni Alex Gonzaga sa paresan ni Diwata, kung saan mas inunahan pa ito ni Alvin TV na videohan at i-upload bago sila Alex. Crazy, mga kahombre. Alam ko, naalala niyo itong mga situation na to, no? Nag-video ako in regards to this, pero may awa ako kay Diwata ng panahon na ito. Kasi alam niyo naman, mga kahombre ko, imagine niyo, sa ilalim ng tulay tumira yung tao. Tapos ano bang ine-expect niyo para sa tao na atira sa ilalim ng tulay? Siyempre wala siyang alam sa mga ganyan. He came there like a wrecking ball. Winasak niya ang scene ng mga street vendors. From zero to hero agad si Diwata. So malupit po ang idea niya sa marketing pero hindi sa social media. Ibig sabihin nun, matindi talaga yung charisma niya at umasa lang siya sa mga tao na nagbibideo-video sa kanya. In short, nakasanayan niya lahat na yan, mga kahombre. Makikita rin naman natin na halos lahat ng mga content na ginagawa talaga ni Alvin at RTV sa panahon ngayon ay nauukol lamang kay Diwata. At umaabot sila ng milyon-milyon views na nagre-resulta sa napakalaking mga kitaan mga kahombre ko ng panahon na yun. Dahil dito, napansin at ginawa naman ni MG ng content ito calling out Alvin at RTV sa kanilang mga kabulas. And sa tingin ko mga kahombre ko, napanood ni Diwata lahat yung kinontent ko na yun. Kasi dumating po ang point na finally pinutukan niya ang kanyang YouTube channel. Dumating rin ang point na pinutukan niya na ang kanyang Facebook at doon na siya mismo nag-upload. In fact, ang bilis niya nagkaroon ng 1 million followers sa Facebook. Dahil nung nag-start na siya na mag-upload sa sarili.
Now, ito ang masasabi ko sa iyo, Diwata. Kung ako sa iyo, gumawa ka na ng social media team mo. Huwag mong pabayaan yung page mo habang sikat ka pa, Diwata.
Sabi ko, ginagawa ng batasan ng mga vloggers. Ikaw, sabi ko, mga bata.
Ay, hindi ko iniisip mo ginagawa kong batasan kasi in the first place, wala naman silang hinihingi sa akin ng pera. Magkos, nakakatulong pa sila sa akin para i-vlog, para lumamay yung customer, dumami ang mga kita, para makilala Diwata.
Yes. Sa dulo ay hindi na lamang ito pinansin ni Alvin TV at nagpakuloy sa kanyang ginagawa at makikita natin na hanggang sa ngayon ay kasama ito ni Diwata palagi. So kumbaga, mapapansin natin dito mga kahombre ko, yung mentalidad ni Diwata as negosyante. Kahit negatibo, gagawin na lang natin positibo kasi at the end of the day, pinagkikitaan at pagkakakitaan din naman niya yan through his paresan. Yun lang naman yun, di ba? Pero nakakainayang lang din sa isang banda, no? Kasi at the end of the day, nandyan ka na. Bakit hindi mo pagkakitaan lahat ng dapat mo pagkakitaan? Yun lang naman ang sa akin, no? That's Diwata. That's why he is very successful. Kasi hindi na siya mag-isip. Wala siyang iniisip na negative, siguro, no? He's just thinking positive about his business name. Ukol sa mga malalaking mga influencers, artista at iba't ibang mga negosyante. Nagagawa na rin nilang subukan ang taktik na ito upang may makuha silang mas malaking balik. Maraming influencer ang nagpuntahan at binibigyan nila si Diwata ng ikakaligayan nito. Tulad ng pagbibigay kay Diwata ng libreng sasakyan, malaking halagang pera, malaking halaga, amount ng negosyo, mga kahombre ko. Pasikatan po ang mga vloggers, ang mga artista no, naalala ko. Dami, grabe mga kahombre ko. Palakihan para makuha ang pansin ni Diwata at makakuha ng threat. ng trend sa social media. Dahil sa pagtanggap ni Diwata ng mga special treatments galing sa mga tao yon, ibig sabihin, tumataas na din ang kanyang ego. Ganito pala ako ka-special. Ganito pala ang halaga ko. Eto pala dapat ang buhay ko. Unti-unti na rin nagsisimula ang pagbabago ng ugali ni Diwata. At napansin po natin yan lahat sabay-sabay, mga kahombre ko. In fact, from napakarami niyang supporters, halos 80% nun tumalikod sa kanya at pinagbababas na siya. Sa sobrang kasikatan at pag-usbong ni Diwata, marami na rin tao ang mga bumaya sa negosyo niya, tulad ni Diwaga at ni Rosmar, kung sa ay dinagdagan pa nito ng may libreng pa-swimming ang kanyang pares overload.
Gusto lang masasabi ko sa mga gumagaya. Oo, diba? Wala namang masamang gumaya. Pero naman tayo topic is that. Pero tandaan nyo, I'm the original, pirated na kaya.
Nagsimula ang pinakaunang issue kay Diwata kung saan ay napapansin na nila lumalaki na raw ang ulo nito sapagkat nagagawa ng mga taong magpa-picture kay Diwata at hindi niya ito pinagbibigyan. Dagdag pa dito, kung mapagbigyan naman ni Diwata, makikita natin na kasimangot na ito palagi sa mga larangan. So ngayon, from nagbibigay ang mga tao para mapansin sila ni Diwata at makapag-post sila ng
Hoy, tumulong ako ha! Ipa-trend niyo ako! Ipa-trend niyo ang mga video ko!
to this, pinupuntahan siya ng iba't ibang mga hindi sikat na mga tao, nagpapapicture, binibideo lahat ng actions niya, and eventually, makikita at makikita po natin na merong ugaling lalabas si Diwata, and that's very normal. Kasi human lang si Diwata. Ayan yung hype, ayan yung trend. So, aasarin ka talaga ng mga tao. Tandaan niya. For the views, for the followers, maybe ito na yung chance nila. Kasi si Diwata, yung boost giver ng panahon na yun, mga kahombre ko. Kung gusto mong maging vlogger, pumunta ka kay Diwata. Ayan nga yung sinasabi ko dati, di ba? Paunti-unti na po lumalabas ang tunay niyang ugali at bumabastos na si Diwata ng napakarami. Pero di natin masisisi si Diwata, mga kahombre ko. And I understand this. Kasi para sa mga influencers, man, it's very tough. Kasi minsan, dapat nakapokus ka sa trabaho, hindi mo na alam ang gagawin mo. Magpapapicture ka ba o magpo-focus ka sa trabaho? Yun lang. And it becomes crazy and crazy every single time. Kumakalat din na reason dito ay ine-entertain lamang ni Diwata ang mga taong nagbibigay sa kanya ng mga ikakayaman nito. May nagbigay kay Diwata noon ng goldfish at hindi niya ito tinanggap. So dito mga kahombre ko, lumalaki na yung ulo ni Diwata. Halata, no? Ang pagtrato ni Diwata sa iba't ibang mga tao ay nakabase na sa pakikinabangan niya. Sapagkat kung mga influencer, celebrity ito, na especially may bigay sa kanya, pinapatuloy niya pa ito sa office niya at pinapakain niya doon. Nandyan po ang biggest mistake si Diwata. Kumakalat ang isang video kung saan ang Diwata Pares Pasay Branch ay may mga uod na nakakalat sa labas. Grabe kadiri, mga kahombre ko. May mga taong nagre-reklamo na rin na mabaho sa lugar ni Diwata. Nagulo yung iba't ibang mga kagamitan dahil sa natamasang bagyo. At pagdating din sa food safety ay di pa sigurado kung nakapasa ito. At makikita din natin, mga kahombre ko, na ang mga pinaglalagyan ng kanilang Diwata Pares, no? Talagang napakarumi. Ayon sa mga criticism na ito, nagagawang hindi tanggapin ito ni Diwata at sinasabi niya sinisiraan lamang siya ng mga tao. Naglabas na rin ng saloobin si Diwata ukol sa hindi pagpapapicture nito sa mga tao at sinabing hindi niya naman ito pagkakakitaan. Nagawa niya pang sabihin na mas magandang magbayad na lang daw sila dito.
Naman, may basher na naman ng pick account, gumawa na naman ngayon ng ng stay na. Pag naniningil ng picture, 1.5 daw, pag wala daw 1.5, di pwede magpa-picture. May mga pick account na gumagawa ng ganun ngayon.
The more na mainis si Diwata, the more na marami kang views. Ganyan po yan ang panahon na yan, mga kahombre ko. Sa katulutuluhan ay naging pabagsak na si Diwata. At halos lahat ng content na gagawin sa kanya ay ukol sa paglaki na nito ng ulo at pagbagsak niya sa social media. Tulad ng wala nang nakain sa kanya, etc. etc. Arestado si Diwata dahil sa kasong slight physical injuries na isinampa sa kanya noong pang 2018. Hinuli ng Pasay City Police si Diwata noong April 16, 2024 sa kadahilan na nagkaroon ito ng warrant and subpoena. Agad nakalaya rin naman si Diwata pagtapos ito magpiyansa ng halagang 3,000. Eto na mga kahombre ko, dito na tuluyang nalunod ang ating si Diwata at nakakaawa na rin. Si Diwata ay nagawang tumakbo sa politika kung saan nire-representa nito ang isang party list bilang isang fourth nominee. Nagresulta ito sa pagbabago ng ugali ni Diwata. At mapapansin natin naglaylo ito at muling tinatangkilik ang lahat ng mga netizens na gusto magpa-picture sa kanya. Kumakalat din ang balita na ginagamit lamang si Diwata ng party list na ito at nakilala hindi vendor ang mga nagpapatakbo nito. Isa pa mga kahombre ko, before it even happened, ayaw niyang magpa-picture. Ayaw niya magpa-picture sa mga tao dito. Ngayon, siya na mismo ang nagpapapicture, mga kahombre ko. Siya na mismo ang naghahabol sa inyo. Siyempre, tumatakbo yung kanyang party list. Alam niyo na. Diyan pa lang, napakamaling-mali na po talaga sobra yung naging desisyon ng party list na to upang kuhanin si Diwata. Wala siya pwede. Natapos ang eleksyon seleksyon at natapos sila Diwata bilang ika-110th place sa mga tumakbo na party. Naglabas ng saloobin si Diwata at isinaat na nalulungkot ito sa pangyayari at saan pa siya nagkulang.
Ito lang ang ating real account. Ang daming fake account, hindi yan tulas. Ito lang yung live natin, yung ibang nakikita niyo dyan, mga fake account yan ay nakikita nyo sa Facebook. Ito lang yung account natin na original. Ito ang ginagamit ko ngayon. Wala na akong ibang account.
Okay. So, fake news pala to. Itong nag-post na ito. Ang totoong hindi fake news ay ang pagbigay nito ng reply sa mga lupot sa pangyayari. Bagkos ay pagkapuot pala at minumura niya ang mga netizen na nagko-comment sa kanya. Babasahin ko ba ulit to? At ito na po ang pinakalas, mga kahombre ko. Sa dulo ay bumalik na si Diwata sa dati niyang gawin. At halos pinapansin na nito lahat ang kanyang mga bashers. Nagagawa na rin itong tirahin ng mga influencers tulad ni Rendon at ni Makagago. What's up, man?
Meron lang ako call out kasi ito talaga may isang vlogger na lagi akong pinapansin. Matagal na ko nagpapapansin sa akin eh. Sino pong vlogger yun? Nakalimutan ko yung pangalan. Makatahi ba yun? Makatahi no? Yung ano niya, channel niya. Basta parang ganyan, parang kung nila sa Makatahi, nakalagay, Diwata, the biggest, ano ba yun? The biggest malaki ang ulo. Naku, correct. Anong ulo ba? Kasi kung itong ulo, sakto lang. Pero kung ito, na, malaki talaga ito. Nagul-agoy na talaga. Nakalimutan ko yung pangalan niya. Basta Makatahi ba yun? Basta yun yung vlogger na yun. Hi guys! Pakilala ko lang sa inyo ang bago kong anak, bago kong aso. Malaki daw ko tapos ang lakas daw nito kumahul. Kaya naman pinangalanan ko siya, ang pangalan niya ay Rendon. Ayan. Hello Rendon, shout out ka naman sa kanila.
Hindi ko alam ba't siya nagagalit kay Rendon, wala akong idea. At hindi ko rin alam ba't siya nagagalit sa akin. Sinabihan ko lang naman siya sa akin. Hindi ko alam. Why are you doing that? Anyway, mga kahombre ko, sino ba ang pipiliin ko? Yung prime Diwata ba? O yung Diwata? Para sa akin, mga kahombre ko, ngayon na nireview ko ang talagbuhay ni Diwata. Ang pipiliin ko dito, bagong taon, bagong talpakan. Pero wala na naman pipiliin nyo, nasa link. Down below, try mo meron o wala na naman. Let's go. Ay yung prime Diwata. Hindi yung Diwata ngayon. Kasi ang dami na yung achievements in a short amount of time. And I know for sure na super proud ang pamilya niya sa kanya, sa mga nagawa niya, at sa mga nakuha niyang achievements. Because it was never easy for him to be in this type of position. From zero to something. Crazy yun, mga kahombre. Gustong-gusto ko yung prime niya kasi pinakita niya na with the right hustle dito sa Pilipinas, pwede kang magkaroon ng something. Hindi mo masasabi na dyan ka na lang, nasa Pinas ka lang, wala kang kwenta. Hindi mga kahombre. Because you can become somebody. Kung si Diwata nga, nakaya, di ba? Nasa ilalim siya ng tulad. Ikaw pa kaya. That's a game changer too. Para sa mga taong nakasunod sa karera ni Diwata. It's nice, mga kahombre. He became very, very successful. Isa pa sa mga bagay na nakita ko kay Diwata, yung kanyang fire na ilalaban ko kung ano yung akin at yung kanyang willingness na to promote his business sa kahit na anong sitwasyon, kahit saan na siya nalagay, okay na. At yung kanyang dedication at hard work, walang makakatalo sa partner ni Diwata, mga kahombre ko. Kung meron man, it's gonna be tough and tough and tough. Unfortunately, ang sumira kay Diwata, tama din naman yung mga kasabihan na isa lang naman ang pwedeng tumalo at yun ay yung sarili mong desisyon at sarili mong pamilya. Wala nang ibang pwedeng tumalo. Unfortunately, lumaki po talaga ang ulo ni Diwata. Meron pa ba tayong susundan kay Diwata? Meron pa ba tayong makikitang bago kay Diwata? I think wala na. Because we've seen it. Aside na lang, kung makakahanap siya ng bago niya magiging business at mapapahayag niya ng mas pa sa Pares Overload. Baka pwede. Pero sa ngayon, kung ano yung nakikita nyo, yun yun. At isa ko pa ang sasabihin bago matapos ang lahat ng ito. Kapag may dumating na sa inyong swerte, hindi nyo masyadong gano'n. Instead, dapat paaparin sa lupa at magkasala. Hanggat may buhay, mga kahombre ko, ibig sabihin, meron ka pang iaangat at meron ka rin itatansa. Anyway, mga kahombre ko, hinihintay niyo siguro. Gusto niyo bang malaman kung tutuparin ko ang aking pangako sa inyo na ako na ang last ever na pupuntang influencer kapag laos na si Diwata? Eto na yun! I think the end is very near, and I think it's time for me to go and visit you, Diwata, para makita ko naman kung masarap talaga ang Diwata para sa overload. Eto na, mga kakumpra ko ha, bababa na tayo. Wala si Diwata, no? Wala si Diwata. Sige. Sino may sabi? Sayang, nasa Cavite ka pala. Sige, tara. Let's go. Bali, ito na po ang Diwata Pares mo. Sayang, Diwata. Titikman ko pa naman. Last influencer. So, ayan yung pagkain niya. So, meron tayong mami, which is solid naman. It looks good. Rice niya. And then yung mga tao niya, I think, kaso may nagko-construction na nakikita natin. So, may ginagawa. May mga tao din naman, no? Luckily, hindi tayo masyado napapansin dito. So, eto, may mga soft drinks, then, eto na ata yung Pares Overload. Alright? Yeah. Let's eat! Eto yung Pares, mga boss. Titikman natin, ha? Bawal ako nito, pero try lang. Laging sarap. Oo. Masarap, guys. Masarap siya. It's actually nice. Masarap, guys. Masarap. Mami Overload, yung Diwata. Actually, mas masarap to. So, ito yung chicken inasal ni Diwata, ano? Tikman natin. Masarap din ako. So, di lang talaga ako pwede kumain kasi nasa diet ako. Masarap na ako. Ako kumakain na ako. Perfect. Perfect. Fine. Ayun nga mga kahombre ko, no? Although specifically si Diwata ay parang bad trip sa akin. Madalas niya akong pagtripan, itong mga nakaraan, hindi naman ako sumasagot. Or ba? Kung makikita po natin yung aso, ipinangalan sa akin at sa kaibigan ko si Ren. Si MJ! Yung ganda, si MJ. Kung titingnan nyo, tinaw mo naman, itsura ko. Sa tingin ko naman, mas may tsura pa ako kaysa kay Diwata. Pero anyway, Diwata, in all fairness, man, napakasarap ng pagkain mo. Siyempre, hindi na nga lang kinaya yung iba kasi ang dami, sobrang namin in-order. Worth 1,000 na, 1,000 pesos, 950 pesos precisely. In all fairness, napakasarap, man. And hindi ako pwedeng kumain actually kasi may acid ako sa tiyan, no? Hindi ako pwede ng longganisa, pero kinain ko yung longganisa, napakasarap. Wala talaga akong masabi. And in fact, magte-take out ako ngayon ng longganisa ni Diwata. I really like it. And sigurado magugustuhan din ng family ko yung longganisa. Paano nangyari na ang daming nagsasabi na hindi daw masarap dito kay Diwata, kapako daw, or kasi understandable, may nag-aayos, no? May nagko-construct, tapos dito yung pagkain. Pero kasi normal lang ito, guys, kasi kalendaryo ako eh. Let's say, di ba? Parang gano'n, parang sakto eh. Normal lang na ganyan yung sitwasyon. Come on, man. Aarte ka ba? Kung aarte ka, doon ka sa fine dining kumain. Normal lang ito dito. Nandito ang sistema. Pilipino tayo, you know this, man. Kung ikaw ay maarte, huwag ka na dito. Hindi ka naman din sa totoo lang kailangan ni Diwata, right? He's doing good kasi dami din tao kumakain. Hindi naman, ano oras pa lang? 10:26. Umaga pa lang, mental na. So mamaya pang tanghali, meron pa sa hapon o sa gabi. Man, all in all, I think this is a good place. Diwata is a winner sa part na to. Hopefully lang, Diwata, ma-maintain mo ito. And syempre, para ma-maintain mo ito, ito suggestion ko sa iyo, no? Dapat mas palitin mo pa yung ulo mo. Kasi imagine mo yun, pinagmumura mo rin yung mga fans mo, yung mga hater mo, di ba? Sa halip na mabago yung tingin nila sa'yo, mas lalo mo pang pinapalala. Sana yun lang, yun, baguhin mo, I think, magiging okay ka. Because
Hindi rin madali na magnegosyo mga kahong, pero this is tough, man. Kung ako to, hindi ko to kaya. Blessing to kay Diwata na at talagang pumatok yung parisan niya. Kailangan mo lang kayo sinugali mo, that's it. The rest, perfect. Yun lang, mga kahong. Ang sarap lahat, guys. Promise. Tapos may mga libre pang soft drinks. Diba? Diba? Ano? Ang sarap po. Ito pa, dinakaan. Ito, masarap. Guys, masarap lahat. Promise. Well, sabi niya, yan. So, ako wala guys ha. So, pumunta lang ako dito kasi alam ko na lakas na si Diwata. Pero, yung lakas na word, I don't think so. Mukhang okay naman yung negosyo. Yes. It goes well. Yan na. Wala, good fucking vibes. Doon naman tayo sa kabila.
Tim Duncan. The big fundamental.
Today we're rewinding the career of one of the greatest NBA players and five-time NBA champion, Tim Duncan.
Looking back towards Stevie Jackson and Tim Duncan for the win.
What Tim Duncan lacked in flash, he more than made up for with an almost machine-like consistency.
Duncan was the centerpiece of the Spurs dynasty.
Well, I got you. Honestly, he's the greatest power forward ever.
He passed it to himself. He did. That was amazing.
He captured 5 titles.
Tim Duncan has built a reputation for almost being a humble hero in some regards, a quiet superstar.
Defensively, I mean, who's going to come in the paint? You're shutting the rim down.
5 titles, 3 finals MVPs, 2 regular MVP awards, and 15 All-Star Game appearances. This dude is the greatest power forward of all time.
To Duncan. He gets going. Shaq all over. He gets away to lead.
Fadeaway jump shot off the long line. Wow.
21 for Duncan, 8 in the period, just inside the arc. Regarded by most as one of the greatest players in NBA history.
San Antonio Spurs are your world champions.
Greatest franchise, nothing but a winning franchise.
So good.
One of the rarities in pro sports to have 5 championships, and they all because of him.
Lucrative Ginobili. Back to Tim Duncan. Known for his quiet leadership, unmatched consistency, and masterful fundamentals, Duncan redefined excellence on and off the court. Duncan grew up in the U.S. Virgin Islands. He was a star swimmer who had aims at an Olympic run.
This is where Tim lived. This is where he grew up as a child until he left to go to college.
However, Hurricane Hugo destroyed the only Olympic-sized training pool in the area in 1989.
Not much escaped Hugo's path of destruction. One casualty meant everything to a certain young swimmer.
Duncan was a swimmer as a youngster.
Folks, the story about Duncan is he only began playing basketball after a hurricane destroyed the public swimming pool.
Tim would leave swimming behind and take up basketball.
Tim took to basketball like a fish to water.
Ninth grade, we just started to do. They started really teaching me how to play.
It helped that he sprouted 8 inches his senior year, growing to just a hair under 7 feet tall. Timmy committed to Wake Forest and immediately became a national star.
After this, I'll say that he's the best player I've seen in person. I don't think I ever saw him have a bad game.
A sponge for basketball knowledge, Duncan's game improved year after year.
My money, Tim Duncan is the very best.
Tim went on to become a star at Wake Forest University.
He was just one of those guys you could count on. He was so good at every phase of the game.
When you talk about Duncan, as we look at his numbers right now, freshman, sophomore, and his junior year, unbelievable, and they've gotten better. He was a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, 2-time ACC Player of the Year, and National Player of the Year in his senior season.
Duncan got another A+. I'll tell you, he's the doctor who follows you like when you talk about playing in the lane. He had 23 points, 6 big rebounds, 8 assists. He did it all on New Year's Eve.
Worked so hard. He was just ready to play every night.
He graduated ready and prepared for the NBA game after playing all 4 seasons in college. The Spurs were statistically likely to select 6th overall, but as fate would have it, they hit the NBA lottery and won the first pick.
The 1997 NBA draft goes to the San Antonio Spurs.
Congratulations. First pull off a miracle in the 1997 draft lottery and snagged Mr. Fundamental, who forever changed the franchise.
Up until the time he was 14 years old, Tim Duncan was a world-class swimmer in the Virgin Islands. He's now, as he says, a point guard deceptively packaged as a forward center.
With the first pick in the 1997 NBA draft, the San Antonio Spurs select Tim Duncan from Wake Forest.
So you get this massive piece to the puzzle with the #1 overall pick in Tim Duncan. I mean, what's that like for you as the big man in San Antonio, and now there's another big man in San Antonio?
I was down on my knees just saying thank you, Lord. Oh my God, thank you so much.
San Antonio was buzzing with anticipation for the new season.
There was no doubt that Duncan would be wearing the silver and black, but the question that lingered was, what would his impact be?
Duncan would be paired with legend David Robinson, and the two would become known as the Twin Towers.
How you gonna play?
Get off the middle. A lot of what we've kind of shared is how to approach the game. You know, he's got that right mentality. He doesn't get down. He knows that, you know, playing next to me, a lot of that pressure's off of him. He doesn't have to be Mr. Superstar every night.
It was October the 31st of 1997, Halloween night, season opener in Denver, Colorado.
That's what goes first. Tim Duncan.
When you look at Tim Duncan right there, you'd say he was totally disinterested. I guarantee you that is not the case. I think, Jerry, a lot of people have been impressed, as we have, that he plays with a maturity that belies the young players that seem to typify the NBA game. Comes back to
With 2 Hall of Fame caliber big men playing together with minimal ego, the Spurs were instantly transformed into a powerhouse. Duncan walked into the NBA ready for prime time. Coach Greg Popovich ran the perfect scheme to capitalize on the dynamics of Duncan and Robinson.
He's got Anderson all the way, by David Robinson.
In Twin Towers, that's what they call it, you guys. I mean, not the most original nickname of all time.
It's been thrown around.
It's been used before in other instances, but that's what you were.
Tim Duncan's genius can be attributed to another one of the NBA's elite, his own teammate, David Robinson.
The Spurs saw one of the all-time great turnarounds.
Marshall right with Let's see the pick and roll, because Duncan, he'll roll with the best of them.
The first question everybody wants answered is Tim Duncan the real deal?
He is the real deal, as ever done.